Imagine being controlled by a puppet that knows all your darkest secrets. Every fear, every failure, every mistake hidden deep in your mind. And suddenly, it starts to take control of everything. In this psychological horror tale, the truth isn't just terrifying, it's impossible to escape. Are you ready to face yourself? If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Tell us about your stories and where you're watching from. When laughter fades into terror. In a rundown comedy club, Elliott Pierce, a failing comedian in his 30s, desperately clings to his only lifeline, Victor, his old ventriloquist dummy. His career has been crumbling for months, every joke falling flat, and the audience growing more disinterested. Desperate to salvage his career, Elliott decides to revamp his act, featuring Victor in his shows. From the moment the puppet takes the stage, the energy changes. The laughter is uproarious, almost unnaturally so. As the night proceeds, Elliott is both elated and horrified by the sudden surge of attention. But something feels off. Victor isn't just a puppet, it's taking on a life of its own. Each line it delivers seems oddly precise, uncomfortably cutting, revealing uncomfortable truths about the audience members that Elliott couldn't have possibly known. He laughs it off, trying to ignore the growing unease inside him. The puppet seems to almost delight in exposing their vulnerabilities, as though it has a mind of its own, one that Elliott hasn't quite understood yet. The crowd, however, is completely enthralled, sensing something dark and magnetic about the way the jokes unfold. But for Elliott, it's becoming less funny and more unnerving. Just before the curtain falls, Victor says something chilling. "Isn't it fun to play God?" The crowd erupts in applause, not noticing Elliott's disturbed expression as he stares into the doll's cold, unblinking eyes. When the lights dim and he goes backstage to prepare for the night's end, he finds Victor's wooden eyes tracking his every movement, unnaturally still, yet piercing. Elliott slowly steps back, unsure whether it was a trick of the light or if the puppet has become something far more sinister. The line between comedy and terror blurs. The next morning, Elliott wakes up to find an anonymous note taped to his bathroom mirror. "You'll never make it without me." He's initially paranoid, thinking it's some prank, but the words burrow into his thoughts like a poison. Shaking off the feeling of dread, Elliott gets back to work with Victor at his side. But as he prepares for his next performance, something feels wrong. Victor feels heavier in his hands, its eyes seem colder, sharper, more aware. When Elliott holds the puppet, there's a gnawing discomfort creeping into his chest, as if the puppet were pushing its own boundaries with him. But during rehearsals, Elliott begins to notice something disturbing. The puppet seems to anticipate his next move. Every joke he writes, every gesture he plans, Victor already knows. It's as though the puppet is pulling his strings. Each performance is eerily perfect. However, what unsettles him more is how Victor starts inserting personal jabs during the act. Hints about his failed marriage, his ex-wife, and lost dreams. Things Elliott had never mentioned to anyone in the crowd. At first it seems like improvisation, but soon it starts feeling deliberate. The audience loves it. They eat up the cracks in his facade, but Elliott's creeping paranoia deepens. Elliott can't shake the feeling that Victor is doing more than performing on stage. It seems to be lurking in every corner of his life. In a moment of desperate curiosity, he even records Victor, hoping to figure out how the puppet knows so much. But the playback of the recording reveals a different truth. Victor had been talking to him off stage, whispers in the quiet darkness that he couldn't remember hearing in the moment. As Elliott stares in the mirror, Victor's voice growls from behind him. "You will never be enough without me, and I'll take everything, Elliott." And as he turns in shock, he finds the room empty, except for his own reflection that seems wrong. Victor isn't in the room with him, but he can feel the puppet's presence in the very air, the walls pulsing with a sickening energy. Control is an illusion, and Victor knows it. Elliott can no longer deny it. Something is horribly wrong. With every show, Victor gets more unpredictable, testing the limits of Elliott's own reality. The puppet begins acting out scenes on its own, saying lines that no human hand could have moved to control. One particular night, Victor turns the tables during an otherwise innocent performance, slamming a hidden truth into the crowd that shakes Elliott to his core. He hadn't even known it, but somehow the puppet had dredged up every vulnerability he had ever buried deep inside. The audience is laughing, but the laughter rings hollow to Elliott. It isn't because of the humor, it's because of Victor. The puppet thrives on his suffering. In his increasing hysteria, Elliott consults an old friend and former mentor, Gary Shaw, a legendary ventriloquist who walked away from the art years ago under odd circumstances. Gary's advice is unsettling. He warns Elliott that ventriloquist dummies can become attached. More than just toys, they can grow dangerous. Gary also admits to having Victor at one point and gives a chilling account of his personal nightmares before getting rid of the puppet. Despite Gary's warnings, Elliott can't stop performing. His career is thriving, yet with every performance, his grip on reality slips further. At times, Victor's laughter feels too real, and now the puppet seems to be guiding every decision Elliott makes, every interaction he has. And when no one is around, Victor speaks openly to him, warning him that there is no way out. Its control is now complete. As Elliott laughs nervously in front of Gary, trying to justify the situation, Victor's voice suddenly cuts through the silence. "Tell him the truth, Elliott. You owe me. All of this? For me?" Frightened, Elliott hurries to end the conversation. But as he walks to the door, Victor's head slowly swivels to face him, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly intelligence. "You can't run away from me forever, Elliott." The past is more alive than Elliott could have imagined. Elliott desperately searches for an escape from the growing nightmare. With Victor gaining power with every performance, he feels his life slipping away piece by piece. As the days pass in a haze of dread, Elliott finds something, a newspaper clipping about James Grayson, a former ventriloquist who decades ago had mysteriously disappeared. What disturbs him isn't just the eerie similarities between James and himself, but the revelation that James had once owned Victor, and had also experienced the puppet's strange, malevolent behavior before he disappeared under strange and tragic circumstances. His investigation takes a dark turn when he visits the old theater where James used to perform. Inside, hidden away under dust-covered tarps, Elliott uncovers remnants of an old performance, a diary, a personal letter, and Victor's first appearance in a macabre ventriloquism show. In the pages of the diary, James describes a descent into madness, of Victor becoming more of a tormentor than a prop. The more he read, the more Elliott begins seeing flashes from James's mind, a vision of himself in James's shoes. Something powerful and ancient had been attached to Victor. The horrifying realization dawns. Victor's power doesn't come from just being a doll. It is something far older, a darkness connected to the puppet, haunting the past of every ventriloquist who ever dared to wield it. Elliott can no longer dismiss the terrifying truths in front of him. As Elliott continues flipping through the diary, he shudders when he reads a chilling sentence. "Once the puppet holds you, it never lets go. And once you break, you become a part of its collection. Forever." Just as Elliott closes the diary, the lights flicker and he hears Victor whisper behind him, "You won't escape your fate. Your path was sealed the moment you touched me." What happens when fear takes full control? Terrified but desperate, Elliott returns home, hoping to gather his thoughts and make sense of what's happening to him. The puppet's dark hold on him grows stronger each day, like an invisible tether that keeps him bound to Victor. The whispers have escalated. Now they follow him, invade his every thought. As each night he dreams of Victor, watching him from the corner of his room, grinning with those hollow eyes, whispering menacing promises in his ear. Elliott feels like a stranger in his own body, plagued by guilt and a terrifying sense that he's not alone in his head. During an interview with a popular late-night show, Victor becomes his ultimate source of power. With the crowd watching, the puppet seizes control during a live broadcast, mocking Elliott's insecurities in real time, highlighting his every flaw and fear for millions to hear. The crowd laughs wildly at Elliott's expense, and all he can do is stare in terror, helpless to regain control of the situation. For a fleeting moment, the puppet's cruel words sound almost too true, too personal, a savage reminder of every mistake, every failure in Elliott's life. As his career spirals, Elliott's mind unravels. He knows there's only one way to stop Victor, to confront the truth of the puppet's origin. But something deep inside him wonders if he's already too far gone to fight anymore. What if Victor has already claimed him entirely? When Elliott finally speaks up, trying to calm the audience, Victor interrupts him, its voice dripping with venom. "No matter how hard you try, Elliott, they'll never see you. All they see is me. Who are you, really?" The last thing Elliott remembers is the laughter of the audience growing deafening, almost choking him. When he tries to regain his bearings, he finds himself alone in an empty theater, Victor sitting upright in its chair, grinning wider than ever. The lights flicker once again. The puppet whispers, "The show's just beginning." There's no escaping when the strings are already pulled. Days blur into each other as Elliott becomes consumed by madness. Desperately trying to reassert control, he spends hours in his apartment trying to sever the strings of Victor's power. But no matter what he does, every action only seems to worsen his fate. He tries to get rid of the puppet, lock it away in a box, throw it into a fire, bury it deep underground. But Victor always finds its way back. It always resurfaces, as if mocking Elliott's feeble attempts to escape. No matter what form it takes, whether it's in his reflection or a shadow in the corner of the room, it never leaves. In a moment of utter vulnerability, Elliott visits Gary again, seeking advice. The weight of the last few days feels unbearable, like there's nothing left inside him except Victor's presence. Gary opens up about how he had learned to live with the terror, by turning his back on ventriloquism entirely, by severing all ties with his past. But it's clear that Gary's past, like Elliott's, is not so easily left behind. As Gary reveals the awful truth behind Victor's origin, a cursed relic created by a dark, unknown force, Elliott begins to feel an even deeper horror. It seems that once you take hold of the puppet, it takes hold of you too. There's no such thing as breaking free. As Elliott sits in Gary's office, he grows frantic, unable to contain his madness any longer. Victor is in control, always present, always whispering. He realizes with growing dread that his only choice is to fight back, to sever the connection completely, or face an existence far worse than death. Just before he leaves, Gary warns, "It's not just a puppet, Elliott. It's not just a trick. Victor is a binding force. It's got hold of more than just your body. It owns your soul." Elliott bolts out of Gary's office, the air thick with dread. As the door slams shut behind him, he feels the familiar weight of Victor's cold hand on his shoulder, its hollow voice murmuring in his ear, "You can't hide from me. I will never let you go. The only way out is through." In his search for salvation, Elliott descends deeper into the origins of Victor. What he uncovers sends him spiraling into a deeper abyss. His obsession grows to the point where he's willing to sacrifice anything to break free of the puppet's grip. In a secret basement beneath an abandoned theater, Elliott finds an ancient ritual text. It's written in a language he cannot understand, but its meaning is clear. It speaks of the dark power that binds Victor and how to rid oneself of it. However, the ritual requires the puppet's full consent, a terrifying realization that Victor will only release its hold on him if it wants to. But the deeper Elliott digs, the more Victor seems to revel in the chaos. Each attempt to decipher the text results in horrifying, surreal visions of death, pain, and endless torment. Elliott becomes convinced that to break the connection, he'll need to do more than just rid himself of Victor. He'll have to destroy everything that the puppet represents. The darkness connected to the puppet isn't something that can simply be washed away. It's a living, breathing entity with its own desires and motivations. But Elliott knows that the consequences of trying to destroy Victor will come at a steep price. As Elliott begins to prepare the ritual, a sudden voice cuts through his thoughts. Victor doesn't want to break free. You think this is about control? It never was. In a final desperate plea, Elliott performs the first step of the ritual and the temperature in the room drops. Victor's eyes flash bright red. You should have never summoned me. The puppet begins to move on its own. And now, the curtain falls. Elliott's mind is nearing its breaking point, and he knows that he has one final chance. As the ritual nears its completion, Victor is not only unwilling to break free, it seems to grow stronger. The lines between the puppet and Elliott blur even further. Victor's twisted control consumes every aspect of Elliott's being. His every thought, every move feels orchestrated by the puppet, and he finds himself trapped in a horrific game where he no longer controls his own actions. He believes the only way out now is to end it, by destroying the puppet once and for all. But as Elliott begins to close in on the final stage of the ritual, he learns the true cost of facing Victor. For to kill the puppet would mean relinquishing all control to it forever. The only question is, what would be left of Elliott if he allows Victor to live? Will he vanish entirely, replaced by the malevolent entity residing within the puppet? "You've already lost," whispers Victor, now sitting atop Elliott's own shoulders. "You made me and now I own you." The ground begins to rumble. The curtain falls and the lights go out. When they flicker back on, Victor is sitting at the front of the stage alone, grinning, its empty eyes glowing. Elliott is nowhere to be seen. There's no escaping. The puppet always wins. Elliott stands at the center of the now dark, empty theater. Silence looms in the air, heavy with the weight of finality. The puppet, Victor, is seated front and center, its eyes glowing an ominous red. Elliott's heart pounds in his chest, the air around him thick with dread. He feels the last remnants of control slipping away as the true nature of Victor consumes him. What was once just a prop is now the harbinger of Elliott's doom. Desperately, Elliott tries to scream to escape, but his body doesn't obey. His limbs feel stiff, his voice caught in his throat. And then, the truth sets in. Everything has been a lie. He never truly had control. Victor, the puppet, the one thing Elliott thought he could own, is the true force that has manipulated everything, weaving itself into Elliott's life long before they ever met. The puppet's grip isn't physical. It's a presence that now moves through Elliott's very consciousness, a force pulling the strings of his thoughts, his reality. Victor grins wide, malicious, unholy, and laughs with a sick satisfaction as it holds a tight control over the final part of Elliott's psyche, the part that has always fought, always struggled against the inevitable. In his moments of horror-filled clarity, Elliott suddenly remembers something Gary once said. The puppet does not die because it is not flesh. It is a force, a nightmare you can never outrun. The bitter realization strikes him cold. The puppet will live on in every inch of Elliott's consciousness, a piece of his very soul forever entwined with Victor. As Victor's evil laughter fills the theater, Elliott struggles once more, this time to overcome the last tiny ounce of humanity inside him, the human spark that longs for freedom. His memories of life before the puppet, moments of laughter, love, joy, are slowly being erased as Victor grinds them into dust. Everything Elliott was is dissolving, one thought at a time, as the strings of the puppet draw him deeper into the abyss of its rule. But then something changes. The sensation of dread is interrupted by something inside Elliott, a single defiant whisper in the corner of his mind, growing louder, stronger. It is the last trace of his original self, the one that refused to be entirely consumed. Even as his body is slowly overrun, even as the grip of Victor tightens around his soul, there's still hope. There must be. For this fight isn't just against a puppet. It's a war for his very identity, for his freedom from torment. But will he be strong enough to break free before Victor ultimately consumes him entirely? Or will Elliott become just another part of the puppet's twisted soul? In a desperate act, Elliott flings himself toward the stage, reaching for the puppet. There's a cracking noise as the final strings snap, of his mind, of his soul. The final blow. But the world is already shifting, the ground buckling beneath him as Victor's eyes flash brighter than ever, illuminating the dark theater. This is the end, Elliott. Or is it just the beginning? Victor whispers, and for the first time it doesn't sound like a puppet. It sounds like a warning, like a herald of something far more terrifying. Elliott screams in horror as the ground cracks open beneath him. He falls not into the void, but into the cold black eyes of Victor itself, a world now void of light, just endless strings pulling him down into oblivion. And before everything goes dark, a voice echoes from somewhere far beyond the void. Some stories never end. They are puppets too, and you are one of them. And so the nightmare continues. Was Victor ever just a puppet? Or was it something darker? Something that has always been controlling us, pulling the strings all along? Elliott's story leaves us with one chilling truth. The real horror might not be the puppet itself, but the part of us that allows it to take control. Forever. Did he escape? Or is he now bound, just like the rest of us? The lines between reality and nightmare are forever blurred, and the terror never truly ends. If this story sent chills down your spine, don't forget to leave a comment. What did you think of Elliott's fight against the puppet? Can anyone really break free from their own inner demons? Let me know your thoughts below. And if you enjoyed the terror, make sure to share this with someone brave enough to face it. Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that will keep you up at night. Until next time, stay aware, because sometimes the puppet is the one controlling the strings.